Thanks very much, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm interested in developing two grounds, the existential conundrum of why, despite masses of evidence, we aren't acting on it, and our planet. In a polemical piece that I wrote, I'm touching on many of the things that I'm going to rapidly go through. And as a tribute to non-joined up literatures, I discovered that Bill had written something not dissimilar, but called it evidence complacency. But he and I are singing from the same hymn sheet. We're on two calamitous trajectories. Business as usual, you can see on the left-hand side, we are set for half the world's population to be overweight or obese by 2035, with all the consequences that follow from that increase in 13 different cancers, type 2 diabetes, ruination of healthcare systems. Linked to that, because food and agriculture relate to the obesity crisis, we also have a food crisis. And as you can see in this familiar figure, business as usual takes us right down into the grey zone. So what this meeting is about getting back into the green zone. So our different governments and international organisations know that we're on these calamitous trajectories and have many ambitions to use evidence to get us off these. Looking at the UK, we have an ambition from our government to halve childhood obesity by 2030. And as you might be able to see here, 2018, it was around 20% of children who were obese, and it should come down to 10%. Well, if anything, it's going up, and particularly amongst poorer children, and the gap is growing. An analysis looking at the initial childhood obesity plan to look at the evidence-based recommendations from a health select committee and what was actually in the plan, you can see from the RAD rating that only one of the evidence-based recommendations made it into that policy. So here we have an ambition evidence gap. And I want to briefly look at state of nature. I think this was the fourth report that came out, and I think it's a beautiful description of the problem that we face. We've never had a better understanding of the state of nature and what is needed to fix it. And what are we doing? So the Office for Environment Protection report published at the beginning of this year, some reason for hope. 4 out of 40 targets are on track, but 11 out of 40 are not. A further 10, I think it is, we're off track, and 15, actually we don't even have the evidence, so we don't know where we are. And it's telling that the CEO says that legal action against the government is under active consideration. So, why are we neglecting evidence in the face of actionable threats? And how can we reverse this? And I'm just offering a very simple framework to organise just a few of the many, many ideas that I hope will be discussed as we go through today. So the 3 I's framework, what it is about, what are the ideas we're using, in whose interests, and what are our institutions doing or not doing? So a lot of our policies, just one slide on this, are using what I will call ineffective ideas to push forward. So this is just 2 examples of recent government plans, both on the environment and on food, where giving people information is seen as key to achieving change. Information is really good for people to have. If you want to change behaviour, this is not the way to get there. We've got powerful minority interests. The Merchants of Doubt, the classic book that told us about this, And so one of the ways that they work to keep effective ideas out of policy making is to deny or distort the evidence, and also to delay or dilute policies. A report published earlier this month from WHO increasing recognition of this. And as you say, as you can see here, they say that one of the major barriers to delays in implementing policies for reducing non-communicable diseases, many of which are linked to obesity and the obesity crisis, 23% of deaths annually in the European region are attributed to four industries: tobacco, food, alcohol, and fossil fuel. Some of you may be familiar with Influence Map, which is a think tank, which is the world's largest data looking at corporate influence on climate change policy. Their recent analysis looking at EU policies that affect both healthy and sustainable diets, they looked at 6 of the policies, and in their analysis you can see that the 3 of the policies, they see that the policy has stalled, which they attribute to the meat and dairy industries. There are some of the associations here. 2 have been weakened or diluted, but one on methane strategy has actually been maintained. But it should be noted that that strategy involves nothing to do with livestock, which is absolutely key to biodiversity loss and healthier food systems. So we've got ineffective ideas, we've got powerful interests. What's happening with our institutions? For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of reading The Blunders of Our Governments, I highly recommend it. It talks about the incentive that our politicians have to make bold ambitions and few disincentives for when these aren't realised. One of the checks and balances that we have is evaluation. And I'm talking here just about the UK, and the NAO report in 2021 looked at evaluation that was built into major spending programmes in the government. And this is recommended as part of guidance, that we have very good guidance in the UK about evaluating policy, but you'll see that only 8% of major government spending projects had a robust evaluation plan that was built into it. So the norm is not to evaluate what we're doing. My last few slides, which are going to sum up on, well, what can we do? I think one of the things we need to do is there's a consensus that we need to protect evidence and policy making from powerful minority interests. So excluding corporations from policy making fora, that's been a central plank of the UN Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And looking at the outcome of COP28, some of you will have seen the FAO report on sustainable food, keeping food and agriculture within 1.5 degrees. And there you'll see no suggestion of cutting livestock or consumption of products, which is one of the main evidence-based things we need to do. Slightly left field for many people will be electing more women politicians. There's good evidence that there's higher quality governance and lower rates of corruption the higher the proportion of women politicians. And the strongest evidence comes from an analysis of environment policies looking at 180 countries. And the higher the proportion of women, the stronger the policies, and that's an association that's completely explained by lower rates of corruption. Interests. We need to prioritise citizens' interests. There's a lot of interest in deliberative activities, and recently in the UK we've had the Climate Assembly and then the People's Plan for Nature. Unfortunately, neither of those were owned by local or national governments, and that seems to be key to increasing the chances that any of these increasing activities actually can make a difference. So final slide on institutions, what can we do to strengthen them? Well, I just want to put forward one set of suggestions, which is putting policymaking on a statutory footing in the main. So when we need transparency, so the design of a policy to use evidence and to actually quantify the contribution that a policy is making towards a goal. Because many of the policies that I've mentioned, looking at childhood obesity, failure was baked in. There was no way those policies could have met the ambition. Monitoring the policy as it goes along, generating evidence, so not just using, but generating evidence. So if it's off course, we get it back on course rather than 10 years later say, oh, well, that didn't work. And policy outcome, which is generally what people think of as evaluation. So we've got a partial model in the Climate Change Act that was amended in 2019, where we have a climate change committee. And so the UK government is obliged to publish its policies and the extent to which they will meet the carbon cap, the carbon budget, and to monitor. But it's a tribute to what has been happening in government, that it's needed some of our NGOs to take government to court to actually get them to revise their policies. Now, there's growing calls for putting policymaking on a statutory footing from these different reports that have come out, increasing recognition that actually it's just not a good enough system if we want to make a difference. So my final slide, my manifesto, this is just a starting point. So ideas, we need living evidence libraries of the kind that Bill has been instrumental in setting up. It's necessary, but it absolutely isn't sufficient, and we all know that. We have to protect evidence from the powerful minority interests. There's growing consensus on that. We're in the foothills for how to do that. We need to prioritise citizens' interest, and I think many here have been working on this. We need a mandate for change. We need to embed the participatory democracy activities, of which there are many, many more, into policy making. It's not enough to have them going on as a sideshow. And finally, our institutions, policy making on a statutory footing, use and generate evidence, and required evidence plans get back on course if the interim monitoring shows the policy off track. That's my manifesto. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks, Theresa.
Shall I run over? Sorry.
No, I don't think you had. I think you're absolutely fine. We've got time for a very quick question, if anybody's got one in the room or online.
Do you have a quick question online?
Yeah.
Which was from Rachel Newgarten, who was curious about the study on women politicians and which report or paper that finding is from.
Thanks for the question. It's a detailed analysis by two women economists, Dorenzo and Daz, and I think it was 2018, but if that doesn't generate the paper, then contact me, or I could give it to Bill and I'm sure he can upload it.
Yeah, I'll add it to the chat this afternoon.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to show another hand.
Oh, yeah. Last question just at the moment with the gentleman in the blue shirt there.
Thanks. Pete Brotherton from Natural England, black shirt, but it doesn't matter. It's a brilliant talk. Thank you very much. Is there anywhere in the world that does the prioritising citizens' interests with a proper participatory democracy, where that's working? Can you give us some examples of that?
Yes, I mean, I think that there are regions in the world locally where that is being used, but it is still very much work in progress. So I'll dig out some examples, and again, I'll pass them on to Bill so that he can put those in the chat. And there are some reviews that are going on to try to look at where these activities are having some policy traction and what are the features of those processes that are having traction, because there are many, many more of them, but I think that we're squandering some of that effort at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Theresa.